This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Hey friend, this is Isabel Melgarejo with A Time to Care the Caregivers podcast. I am super happy to be here with you. And if you noticed, I changed the way I greeted you today. My husband heard my podcast when I was recording it about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and he noticed that I always call you sweetie. And he told me, I don't think that word brings diversity into your crowd. So because I want to be inclusive and I want diversity here, then I'm just calling you my friend because you're my friend. You're going through this process with me and I'm going it with you. That's why I changed the way I greeted you. Going into today's podcast, I will be talking about World Cancer Day, which happens every year on February 4th. So let's get started. As I've mentioned before, we're about to celebrate, and I wouldn't call it celebrate because we are not celebrating cancer, but we are bringing awareness, and that's what this day is all about. Bringing awareness to cancer and the disease and about the patients and about closing the care gap. And what does that mean, closing the care gap? It means that we need to connect with our government officials and bring awareness to them about the fact that we're dealing with this disease, that it is not fair for everybody because some have access to healthcare and some others don't. And that is not an equity practice. Equitable practice would mean that each one of us has access to the same healthcare system and that we have access to the same technology, the same resources, the same quality in doctors, the same knowledge from doctors and nurses. And unfortunately, we don't have that. Not within our communities, not among countries. Some countries have very developed technologies that help doctors find cancers faster and easier, while others are fending to get resources for regular diseases. So how is that even fair for those who have no access to any of these? And if we don't raise awareness, and if we don't complain, and if we don't say anything, nothing is going to change. So if you have a moment today, go to the World Cancer Day and participate in any way that you can or want. And let's be part of this movement. I will leave in the show notes a link to the page for World Cancer Day, so you can do that. And talking about cancer, I want to tell you about this story. My grandma, as you know, I was very close with her, and she had this friend. They were very good friends. She was diagnosed with cancer in her 90s, and she started this chemotherapy. And halfway through it, she was feeling really bad. She had a terrible quality of life, and she decided to quit the treatment. I wanted you to tell you this because I also think that we need to bring awareness about how we want to care for our loved ones when they have cancer or any other diseases for that matter. I think we need to give our loved ones the power to decide how they want to be treated and what kind of care they would like to receive. The decision is very personal, and the decision, it's only for that person to make. If you're the patient, you should be making these decisions yourself, and probably you want to make these decisions ahead of time and communicate them to your loved ones so they understand what you want. And just because you made a decision ahead of time, that doesn't mean that you can change your mind when you're living through a specific situation. And each situation might be different. As I have seen people making these decisions of not going through treatments, I think it is important to raise awareness about how others want to be treated when they're sick. And it is very important that we start these conversations early on to know how to best care for our loved ones, how we can take care of them when they need us the most, and what they are going to need from us. And this is also very important that you communicate with your loved ones what is everything that you need when you're sick. Think about those times when you were a young kid and you would get a high fever and you would be sick. So what would your mom do? I remember my mom bringing me some chicken broth. Yeah, I think everybody gets chicken broth when they're sick. So I would get my chicken broth, and I would also get lots of Pampers. I remember her sitting with me, tucking me into bed and rubbing my back until I would fall asleep. That was her thing every time I was sick. And when our parents grow older, are we tucking them into bed and rubbing their back until they fall asleep? Probably not. Probably they want more just than the regular care of bringing them their food and feeding them and making sure that they're taken care of. And we need to think ways in which we can give that sort of care for them. And also, please listen to this. You as the caregiver in that moment, what is the type of care that you need for yourself? Talking about cancer, we all bring awareness about how to cure this disease and how to make things fair for everybody. I think it's also important to make things fair and equitable for those that are taking care of cancer patients or any other patient. They deserve care, and they deserve to have mental well-being, and they deserve to have care, either from their patients, from other family members, or from someone else. That is what the word care means. Care means that you or somebody else is doing something for someone to make their life better. Care can mean that you are running errands. Care can mean that you're doing dinner for someone, or you're donating your time or your money for a cause that you believe in. All of those are types of care. And usually the caregiver needs care as well. You need care, and you need to prioritize that. You need to prioritize the care that you're giving and the care that you're receiving. And it is very important that you prioritize how you're taking care of yourself and how you're receiving care so that you can go and do the hardest thing, which is take care of a loved one when they're sick and seeing them suffer. It requires a lot of strength, and that's why you deserve a lot of care. So let's think about things that you can do to receive care. You can give yourself care. So you can meditate, you can journal, you can call a friend, you can eat something that you love, do a hobby, or any other of the activities that we have mentioned in this podcast. You can do all of them or one of them. You can also ask for someone else to care for you. Ask your spouse or your partner to cook something for you. Ask your kids to do the laundry. Ask your friend to bring you some chocolates. just because. Asking for what you need, it is important, and I think it is very brave, because receiving the care that you need will help you throughout this process. As I'm closing this podcast, I would like to invite you to go to my show notes and follow the link for the Cancer World Day. Check their activities, and if there's anything that compels to you, go ahead and do it. My way of promoting these activities by sharing it today with all of you in this podcast and creating awareness with everyone that you think it's appropriate. And secondly, if you're liking this podcast, I would love for you to take 1 minute, just 1 minute after you're listening to this, to rate this podcast. I would really, really appreciate that, because that would let other people like you find the resources that they need. Thank you so much for listening to me today. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and see you next time.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.